G'day and welcome back. Okay, it's no secret that kids like to spend, well, some would say, too much time on social media, and opposition leader Peter Dutton, he was one of them. And he said this month that if the coalition would possibly consider banning people under 16 from social media, and he would do that within 100 days of winning the next election. Now, the Albanese government is undertaking a $6.5 million trial of age assurance technology and is assessing at what age children should be able to access social media on a wide-ranging parliamentary inquiry into social media and Australian society. Now, our first guest is a human rights expert. Her name is Radha Stirling, and she's called out the government's proposition to restrict under 16s from social media and use an offensive that is basically insulting assault on parental rights and responsibility. We're going to cross to her right now. She's absolutely phenomenal. The amount of people that she has found justice for over the time that I've known her and well beyond is just countless. Radha, how are you?
Fantastic, and great to see you again, Dean, and to be talking about an Australian issue this time.
Yeah, it is. Now, is it only Australia? Why do we seem to lead the way when it comes to restrictions of rights to just basic stupidity? When it comes to politics, we seem to be so far of the left. And this is a country that so many of us 20 years ago, we used to laugh at the rest of the world and say, we're cool. We've got it happening. They'd never pull the rug over our eyes. The last 4 years proved that we were just immensely programmable here in Australia. We're voting in politicians that are just the polar opposite of what is good for this country. And we just find ourselves copying it time after time. Do you think we are possibly the worst off in the world, or would you put Canada possibly one step above us on that ladder?
I mean, I sort of see Australia, Canada and New Zealand in the same pot. I mean, you could see it during COVID. You can see it in the testing of other things that perhaps countries like the United Kingdom would not allow. Australia will allow those testings. And that includes such as facial recognition technology at the airports and various other technologies were all brought in Australia first. And yes, so I do see Australia as the testing ground for this. And I find this latest push to control the internet extremely, extremely concerning, not just from a parental rights concern, and it is not the government's role to impose themselves these sorts of restrictions. I think that is up to the parents. And if it only applies to social media, we have to ask ourselves, what's the real reason then? Because there is much more dangerous information out there on the internet. Social media is just a very small issue, if any issue at all. So I see this facial recognition technology that they're talking about using to access social media for the youth. Obviously, we are just being conditioned and prepared and for essentially the government to say, right, we have control over the internet, get used to it. We'll start with the children. What's it going to be next? Is it going to be you're only allowed access to view certain voices on the internet, on social media? You won't be able to see, whoever we demonize at the moment. It could be the Tates, it could be Tucker Carlson. Yeah. And I think that's where we're heading. And unless you've been a good citizen, you won't even be able to, access the internet or access social media. You won't be allowed to have a social media account. And we'll be able to track literally everything you do on the internet. You'll have to use a digital ID to sign up. It's very much like China, the country that we criticize for these same restrictions.
It's funny that you should talk about China, because social media in China is a completely different animal. If you are a young child and you're in China and you're using TikTok, you won't be seeing the rubbish that the children in America, New Zealand, Australia, Canada see. You will be given a bunch of highly educational things that pop up. In fact, that is all they will see. I'll throw back to Australia when I was young. You'd come home from school, you'd put the television show on. You'd have a program called The Curiosity Show. You'd have a guy named Professor Julius Sumner Miller. You'd have these other programs such as It's Academic, where schools would go and do like some sort of family feud type deal where they'd answer rather intelligent and current questions about academically where they were at. Now, this is what we used to get. And then you got all this, woke nonsense, childish stuff, inappropriate shows on TV. Even the cartoons are inappropriate. So the kids are heading off in the wrong direction. What the government's doing here, we've got our misinformation or disinformation, as they call them, rules. You've got this push to stop young people from getting on social media. But at the same time, you've got them pushing to lower the voting age from 18 down to possibly 17 or 16. So with all these things, these three things working together, they're hoping to further increase the vote for the left, I would imagine, with all these three things tying in and working simultaneously.
Yes, I don't see them getting a lot of the vote if they do restrict under 17s from the internet and then give them the opportunity to vote. I don't see that as a huge risk. Absolutely, we are seeing more of a push to the left on the censorship side of things. And if we look at what eSafety and the commissioner there has tried to censor on the internet, we can see that her enemies are people like Elon Musk, who she has recently made an enemy of, essentially. So she wants to censor those kind of right-sided voices and absolutely push the agenda of the left. And you can see that through her career history. She worked at Twitter during the Twitter Files days and during the time of mass censorship of right voices. We've seen that she wanted to work with the CIA, and I do believe she would absolutely still have those connections. I'm sure that she's working with them every day, just off the radar. And I hope that someone takes an action against eSafety and actually subpoenas those sort of internal emails and records, because I think we should know if America has essentially an intelligence plan that's trying to change the narrative in Australia, trying to change public perception and steer them towards that kind of Democrat supporting left side. So that's why I thought it was also really good that Tucker Carlson came out to Australia to give an alternative point of view and get people more interested in politics, because I don't think they are enough. I mean, this is a massive issue, censorship, free speech, and the control of the internet in Australia that has massive implications down the line. And then we change the subject and start talking about nuclear power plants. And it's like we're not really talking about censorship at all anymore. And I think we really need to be smarter. We saw how manipulated and subject to disinformation we were during the COVID time, the lockdown time. We saw what our government was willing to do against us in their favour, and now they've been exposed. But there is seemingly very little consequence for them. So I think we need to understand that our government is working for them, for the government. Most politicians are working for the agenda of, other forces. And we need to be aware of that and really stop, have that long-term memory where we remember what they did to us yesterday. We remember that we can't trust their propaganda today and we can't trust their propaganda tomorrow. And we need to be questioning rather than censoring the internet for young people. I think we need to be teaching them critical thinking. We need to have them to be able to discern what is misinformation from disinformation. This is a new world. We cannot say, children, you're not going to be on the internet. This is a new generation. They are going to be on the internet. They're going to be facing AI in the future. Absolutely. So I think what we should be doing is training them for that future, because it is going to happen. And surely China is training their people to be able to deal with this in the best way that they can. And we should be as well. We can't shelter our population.
Yeah, absolutely. Critical thinking, common sense, things that seem to go out with sideburns and flared pants back in the 60s, and they've just continued to diminish over time. I love that you brought up Tucker Carlson, because just when they thought that they had social media under control, wow, didn't he throw a spanner in the works? But that only worked for the adults because it's text-based. You can have mechanisms in place that decide what is and what isn't appropriate. What is very difficult to control at this point is short videos or videos in general, where people can say what they want. They could do hand signals. They could get a point across 10 different ways that AI in its current stage may not be able to pick up on. And I think that's why they're really worried about young kids, because they're on things like Instagram. They're on things like TikTok. They're watching these video shorts, and that's where they're getting all their information. And that information is not going the way the government would like it to go. They're finding it very difficult to shadow ban people that are using videos. And I think that's also part of this push, because that's what they're into. They can't really police it. So when they can't police it and they can't stop it technologically, then what do they want to do? They just want to hit it on the head completely for young people.
I mean, you look at Tucker Carlson and Kat Wong and the question that went absolutely viral, and where she embarrassed herself in front of the whole world. But that went viral on Instagram, on TikTok, everywhere. And it certainly exposed young people to it. I know many, many teenagers said, "Oh, did you see that Tucker Carlson video?" So it's raised his popularity in a sense. So I can see why they would be worried about a really quick video that's able to get out there and go absolutely viral, and they lose control of the narrative. But frankly, that's a good thing. I would rather have the ability to look at other narratives and have the government control the narrative, although sometimes, obviously, I will agree with them. For the most part, I would say that it's more of a risk and a disturbance to us and a risk to our future to have the government controlling beyond what they really should be, as just being a functional government, trying to make the economy good and stop worrying about the narrative out there. No one else is that worried. Parents aren't that worried because it's not that dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to the government, and it's dangerous during crises like COVID, where they can't lie to us because the information is out there.
Radha Stirling, hold that thought. We've got some news headlines to get to. We'll be back, everyone, on the other side with Radha Stirling here at TNT. We are with the absolutely phenomenal, and she is Radha Stirling, somebody, who I have been immensely aware of for a long time now, and who has just done tremendous work around the world, internationally, helping people out who have been hard done by. And Radha, how do we fix this? I mean, is there any way legally, where do we start legally to try and counter what they're trying to do?
It's very annoying, but whenever anything happens against us, laws are rammed through, it ends up having to go through the courts, and it ends up usually taking 2 to 4 years to get anything overturned, which is very disappointing. Obviously voting is very important, and I see that, having just looked really thoroughly into Australian politics over the past few months, I can see that there is an absolute uniparty, more than I've seen in any other country.
Yes.
More than I look at America, the Democrats and Republicans, and what legislation they push through Congress. But here, it's just so ostensibly connected. I can't believe, I look at the Liberal Party, and aren't they supposed to be more on the right side? And they absolutely look like far left from what I can see.
It's amazing, Radha, how much in lockstep, media and the politicians are. Because, as someone who worked in the media, many of us who were conservative aspired to work at a place like 2GB, for example, who, prior to the pandemic, these were people you looked up to. They pretty much were saying all the same things that the rest of us were saying. And in that 4 years really showed up who was authentic, who was real, who was fair income or not. And I no longer have respect for almost anybody at Sky News, almost anybody at 2GB. The politicians, the Liberal Party, our conservative half of the duopoly, now no longer even seems like an option. And we're seeing that play out in in England, where people are waking up, and you've got Nigel Farage now, and just absolutely obliterating. I've got a graph here, and even if he has to form some sort of coalition or whatever, it would be absolutely phenomenal and entirely possible that, they could do something miraculous at the next general election.
It's very interesting watching what's happening in Europe, and certainly Nigel Farage, who's an intelligent man. He would not have run at this time if, he thought it was going to be a waste of time. Obviously, he thinks that he's going to be able to rally enough support behind him to at least form, at minimum, a coalition government that can question what's being put through Parliament, can question the laws, can question, and make some real changes. And I think that's probably where Australia is heading next. I think that the climate is ripe. They might be a little bit behind England and other countries. You look at RFK as well. He's sort of formed his own, there is the possibility that we no longer have to be governed by a two-party system. And I think that is inevitable, because it really is just Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They really are not, representing the people. And I think that Australian citizens should absolutely look at alternative parties, alternative representatives. The more people that we have opposing things like the digital ID in Parliament, the more, the better, obviously. And they can do some really good work to prevent certain legislation going through. I've also written to I respond to the public consultations on issues in great detail. I'll be writing to all of the MPs and expressing my views on certain things. So I think the more that we do that and let them know that, no, actually, you can't just ram this down their throats. We don't want this. We don't want, restricted internet. We don't want a license to access social media and this kind of thing. I think the more we talk about that, we tell our politicians and go out there in public on social media everywhere and express your opinions so people know they're not alone in their thought process. The media would have you think, or the ABC would have you think, that everyone automatically supports social media restrictions and the disinformation police and digital IDs. They would have you think that, or automatically supports Ukraine, sending billions to Ukraine. But when do they actually take into consideration what people actually want? Do they ask us? If we answer, do they want to know what we've said? I don't think so. So I think we're just told this is what everyone believes, just go along with it. And then you get into a situation like in the UK or like in America when they voted for Trump, that there was a silent majority who was very upset at how the country was being governed. And I think we're going to see this in Australia too.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I love what you said about RFK as well, throwing a spanner in the works. And what I love about him, even though he is a former Democrat, he is possibly going to be running as an independent, but he's somebody, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but I trust him more than I trust Donald Trump. And how do I back that up? Well, Donald Trump was the person that gave America and possibly the world the throw-off of Operation Warp Speed. And to get it that wrong, how intuitive could he possibly be? And again, Robert F. Kennedy has been someone who is the epitome of health himself. He advocates for health for everybody. I like that he looks at an honest overall approach. And I think that, personally, he would be my preference for a president in America over Trump. But that's just my opinion.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people feel that way. But again, the Democrats are kind of pushing towards him as well. I think they would have preferred that RFK was actually appointed for the Democrat to run for the Democrats than Joe Biden, and especially after the debate last week. I mean, my goodness. But RFK is probably an option. I mean, he doesn't have a chance of winning this time, but he'd certainly have a chance of winning, I think, in another few years.
Absolutely. I mean, yes. We've had some terrific people there, but they're the ones the media typically, don't support. I mean, Rand Paul, Ron Paul, both doctors as well as senators.
I absolutely love Rand Paul. I think his foreign policy is perfect. He's anti-war. And this is what I like about both Trump and RFK, is their foreign policy, I think, is impeccable. Rand Paul would make a fantastic president. He was 100% on the people's side for COVID. He investigates, he's objective. He does have that scientific mind, but he's also a lawyer as well. I think he is a wonderful representative for the American people.
A very impressive individual indeed, such as yourself, and I appreciate you, Radha Stirling, coming on the program. Just quickly before we go, if you could just tell people where they can find you on the web and find out what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. I have an organisation, dueprocess.international, and also Detained in Dubai for people facing legal issues in the UAE and Middle East.
And there are a bunch of issues that happen in Dubai, and you've helped so many. We'll talk about that another time. Radha Stirling, you are phenomenal. Thank you for coming on and being my first guest back at the new TNT 2.0. We appreciate you very much.